Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where and when you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. My name is Dr. Alistair Finch. For nearly 30 years, I ran one of the most reputable sleep disorder clinics in New England. My career was built on data, on the rigorous application of the scientific method to the most elusive and intimate aspects of human existence, the science of the resting brain. I've treated everything imaginable within the realm of somnology: severe obstructive sleep apnea that threatened lives, debilitating narcolepsy that stole futures, and night terrors so vivid and terrifying they drove adults to leap from windows in their sleep. I've meticulously mapped brain waves with electroencephalograms, analyzed rapid eye movements with electrooculograms, and demystified the shadowy figures and oppressive weights that haunt people in the darkness, attributing them to the well-understood phenomena of hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. I firmly believed, with every fiber of my being, that everything that happens in the night, every dream, every nightmare, every inexplicable sensation, can ultimately be explained by neurology, psychology, or physiology. My world was one of measurable data, predictable patterns, and logical conclusions. But there is one case that remains in the archives of my memory, not as a neatly filed clinical record, but as a cold, unsettling stain on the pristine white canvas of my scientific certainty. A case that represents the only time I closed the door of my meticulously organized office, looked at the stacks of polysomnograms, the detailed sleep logs, and my own carefully penned notes, and had absolutely no answers. It was the case that taught me that sometimes science is not a grand, all-encompassing beacon illuminating every corner of the darkness, but merely a small, fragile candle flickering precariously before an abyss of possibilities that stretches far beyond our current understanding. It all began on a particularly dreary November afternoon, about 5 years ago. The kind of day where the sky hangs low and heavy, promising nothing but more gray. My ever-efficient receptionist, Ms. Albright, informed me about a new patient, a young woman named Maya. She was in her early 20s, an art student at the local university, and had been referred by her family doctor due to severe insomnia and nocturnal anxiety. It was a mundane description, one I saw dozens, if not hundreds, of times a month. The bread and butter of a sleep specialist's practice. When Maya walked into my office, the first thing that struck me, even before she spoke, was how utterly, profoundly exhausted she appeared. It wasn't just a lack of sleep. It was a bone-deep weariness that seemed to emanate from her very core. There were deep, bruised shadows beneath her eyes, almost purple against her pale skin, and she moved with a fragile, almost hesitant gait, as if a sudden, unexpected movement might cause her to shatter into 1,000 pieces. She settled into the plush leather chair opposite my desk, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white with tension, a clear sign of the anxiety that gnawed at her. "Dr. Finch," she began, her voice barely a whisper, raw and frayed at the edges, like a worn piece of silk. "I think I'm losing my mind. Truly. I feel like I'm teetering on the edge of something I can't come back from." "That's a common feeling among my patients, Maya," I replied gently, my tone carefully modulated to be both soothing and reassuring. I had perfected this empathetic yet authoritative demeanor over decades. Sleep is fundamental to our sanity, to our ability to function, to our very sense of self. Tell me what's been happening. Take your time. There's no rush here. I leaned forward slightly, adopting my usual posture of attentive listening, my pen poised over my pristine notepad, ready to capture every detail, every nuance of her distress. I'd heard countless variations of this opening, each one a testament to the profound and debilitating distress that chronic sleep deprivation can inflict upon an individual. She took a deep, shaky breath, a visible effort, as if gathering every ounce of courage she possessed to plunge into icy, turbulent waters. "It's not just not being able to sleep, Dr. Finch. That would be bad enough. It's what happens when I almost sleep. Or even worse, when I wake up. It started a few months ago. I was going through a particularly stressful period at college, with final exams looming and a major art project due, so at first I just thought it was that. Exams, deadlines, the usual student anxieties, amplified by a few too many late nights fueled by coffee." "What exactly started?" I asked, my pen making a small, almost imperceptible scratch on the paper as I noted her initial symptoms. I was looking for patterns, for the classic markers that would guide my diagnosis, to fit her experience into a known category of sleep disorders. "Sleep paralysis," she said, the words heavy with a dread that transcended mere scientific definition, a dread that was palpable in the air between us. At least that's what Google told me it was. The very first time it happened was the most terrifying experience of my entire life. I woke up in the absolute middle of the night, or I thought I had woken up. My eyes were wide open, staring at the familiar ceiling of my old apartment, but I couldn't move a single muscle, not an inch. My body was a stone prison, utterly unresponsive to my frantic commands. I felt an overwhelming, crushing weight on my chest, like someone enormous was sitting directly on me, pressing the air from my lungs. The panic that seized me was primordial. It was a raw, animalistic terror. I tried to scream, to call out for help, but no sound, not even a whimper, came out. It was like being buried alive, fully conscious, but utterly, completely helpless. Her voice trembled, reliving the vivid, visceral terror of that initial encounter. I nodded, my expression calm and understanding, encouraging her to continue. "A classic experience of sleep paralysis, Maya. The muscular atonia, which normally occurs during REM sleep to prevent us from acting out our dreams and potentially harming ourselves, persists for a few moments into wakefulness. The brain is awake, often hyper-alert, but the body isn't quite there yet. It's certainly a terrifying sensation, but harmless from a physiological standpoint. Many people experience it at some point in their lives, often linked to stress, irregular sleep patterns, or even sleeping on one's back." I recited the textbook explanation, my voice a steady drone of scientific fact, hoping to ground her terrifying experience in a rational, understandable framework to strip away any hint of the supernatural dread she clearly felt. "I know," she said, and her eyes, wide and haunted, met mine, holding my gaze with an intensity that surprised me. "I read all about it, every article, every forum post, about the hypnagogic hallucinations, the shadowy figures that appear at the foot of the bed, the oppressive feeling of a malevolent presence. I braced myself for it. I told myself it was just my brain playing tricks on me. A misfiring of neurons, a trick of the light, a vivid remnant of a dream bleeding into reality. I tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it. But then, it changed. It became different. It became specific." This was the point where her story began to diverge sharply from the clinical pattern I was so accustomed to. This was where the predictable path of diagnosis, the familiar algorithms of medical reasoning, started to fray at the edges, hinting at something beyond the ordinary scope of my practice. "About a month ago," Maya continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a secret too strange, too unsettling for the harsh light of day. "I moved into a new apartment with my best friend, Chloe. It was a big step for us, our first place together off campus. Chloe's father, Mr. Thompson, passed away about a year ago. A sudden, unexpected heart attack. It was incredibly hard on her, and on her whole family. He was a truly wonderful man, a big man, very warm, always laughing, always with a kind word or a terrible dad joke. I remember him vividly. He was like a second father to me, always had a comforting presence. His absence left a real void, not just for Chloe, but for everyone who knew him. She paused, swallowing hard, a visible lump in her throat, her gaze drifting to a point beyond my shoulder, lost in memory. The paralysis started happening more frequently in the new apartment, almost every single night. It was relentless. But the presence I felt, it started to feel familiar. The weight on my chest wasn't just a generic weight. It was the distinct sensation of a strong, almost suffocating bear hug. The kind of hug Mr. Thompson used to give Chloe, a hug that was meant to be comforting, but was so powerful it almost took your breath away. It was comforting and terrifying all at once. And the shadowy figure wasn't just a generic shadow. It was tall, broad-shouldered, with a particular stance, just like him. It was unmistakable. I observed her carefully, my mind sifting through the possibilities, trying to fit these new, unsettling details into my established frameworks. The human mind, I knew, is a natural storyteller. It seeks patterns, even where none exist, and creates narratives from chaos to make sense of fear. A friend's profound grief, a move to a new and unfamiliar environment, the inherent anxiety of a new living situation, coupled with chronic sleep deprivation. These were perfect ingredients for her brain to project a familiar, comforting, yet ultimately terrifying figure onto the anonymous dread of paralysis. It was a classic case of pareidolia, where the brain perceives meaningful patterns in random stimuli. Her subconscious, perhaps burdened by empathy for her grieving friend, was weaving a narrative around her physiological experience, attempting to give form to the formless terror. "Go on," I prompted, my voice neutral, betraying none of the growing intrigue I felt, nor the subtle unease that was beginning to prickle at the back of my neck. I needed more details, more data points before I could construct a coherent explanation, before I could dismiss this as merely another case of an overactive imagination. "One night, it happened again," she recounted, her voice now hushed, almost reverent. "I was paralyzed, lying on my back, utterly helpless. But this time, it wasn't completely dark. There was a warm, soft, almost ethereal light emanating from the corner of my room, near the window, like from a lamp that wasn't actually switched on. It pulsed gently, almost invitingly, casting long, dancing shadows across the ceiling. And in the heart of that light, I saw a silhouette, a large, masculine figure. I couldn't make out the face. It was just a dark, indistinct shape against the glow, but the posture, the sheer presence. I knew it was him. I felt it in my bones, a certainty that transcended logic, a recognition that bypassed my conscious mind. And then, I heard a voice. "What kind of voice?" I asked, my pen hovering over the paper, my focus absolute. This was the crucial detail, the one that would either confirm my hypothesis of a vivid, stress-induced hallucination or perhaps push the boundaries of my understanding of what the human mind was capable of. "It wasn't with my ears, Dr. Finch," she explained, her brow furrowed in frustration at her inability to articulate the sensation more precisely. "It was in my head, like a thought, but not my own. It was distinct, clear, undeniable, a deep, gentle, masculine voice, and it said, 'Tell my girl I'm okay. Tell her I love her, and I'm always watching over her.' It was so clear, so distinct, as if he was right there, whispering directly into my mind, bypassing my auditory canals entirely." Maya began to weep silently, tears tracing paths through the exhaustion and fear etched on her face. Her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. "Dr. Finch," I woke up trembling, drenched in a cold sweat. "I know how this sounds. I know it sounds like my brain took my anxiety and my friend's profound grief and created this fantasy. A coping mechanism, perhaps, a way to process the trauma. But it felt so real, more real than this conversation. The warmth, the palpable presence, the undeniable message, it was utterly undeniable. I couldn't shake it." "And you told Chloe?" I inquired, already anticipating her answer. The social implications of such an experience were often as complex and fraught as the neurological ones. How does one convey such an experience to a grieving friend without causing further distress or appearing unstable? She shook her head, a fresh wave of tears welling in her eyes, her expression a mixture of despair and resignation. How could I? Imagine the conversation. "Hey, Chloe, sorry about your dad, but I think his ghost is visiting me at night to give you messages." She'd think I was being cruel or that I'd completely lost my mind. I couldn't bear to add to her pain or to have her look at me with pity or worse, fear. I kept it to myself, but it was eating me alive. The case was, as I noted earlier, fascinating. It was a textbook example of how emotional content and interpersonal relationships can color the hallucinations of sleep paralysis. My approach was clear, grounded in decades of clinical practice. Reassure her, explain the neuroscience behind the phenomenon, and schedule a comprehensive sleep study to rule out any underlying physiological issues that might be exacerbating her symptoms. My years of experience had taught me that even the most bizarre subjective experiences often had a perfectly rational biological explanation, waiting to be uncovered by careful investigation. "Maya," I said, my voice adopting its most clinical and reassuring tone, designed to instill confidence and calm. "What you're describing, while undoubtedly deeply unsettling and terrifying for you, aligns perfectly with complex sleep paralysis experiences. The human brain is an incredibly powerful and intricate organ. It fills in the blanks with what it knows, with what it perceives, memories, fears, desires, even unresolved emotions. Your profound empathy for your friend, perhaps even some unconscious, unresolved grief of your own for Mr. Thompson, could very well be manifesting in these incredibly vivid and specific hallucinations. We'll schedule a comprehensive sleep study, we'll gather objective data, and we'll see precisely what your brain is truly doing during the night. It will give us concrete, measurable information to work with, to understand the physiological underpinnings of your experience." She agreed, looking a little, though not entirely, relieved to have a concrete plan of action, even if it felt like a concession to my scientific skepticism. I explained the procedure in detail, the array of electrodes, the overnight stay in our quiet, monitored lab, the constant observation by our trained technicians. She listened intently, a flicker of hope, fragile but present, in her tired, haunted eyes. 2 weeks later, Maya spent the night at our clinic. We meticulously hooked her up to the full array of electrodes, EEG for brain waves, EOG for eye movements, EMG for muscle activity. We monitored her breathing patterns, her heart rate, her oxygen saturation levels, everything that could possibly give us a clue. I expected to find perhaps an unstable transition into REM sleep, maybe some micro-arousals that were disrupting her sleep architecture, or even subtle physiological signs of an underlying anxiety disorder manifesting physically. I had seen it all before, and I was confident I would find a rational explanation. When I reviewed the results the following morning, I was perplexed. And then, as I delved deeper, I became genuinely astonished. They were, to put it mildly, perfectly normal. Her sleep cycle was impeccable, a textbook example of healthy sleep architecture. Every stage, every transition, was precisely as it should be. There was absolutely nothing in the reams of data that suggested a predisposition to sleep paralysis or any other parasomnia. No fragmented sleep, no unusual brainwave activity, no signs of physiological distress whatsoever. It was, quite frankly, the sleep study of a remarkably healthy person who, by all appearances, was simply exhausted from chronic lack of rest. The objective data simply could not, match her subjective experience. It was a scientific paradox. When I met with her to discuss the results, she looked even more tired, if that were possible. Her shoulders were slumped, her spirit seemingly deflated, as if the last vestiges of hope had been drained from her. "It happened again last night," she said before I could even speak, her voice flat, devoid of the earlier emotional intensity, a mere whisper of resignation. Here, in the clinic, even with all those wires and sensors attached to me, I thought being in a controlled environment, being monitored, would stop it, but it didn't. I was genuinely surprised, a rare occurrence for me. Here, Maya, our technicians were monitoring you all night. There was nothing in your vitals or brainwaves that indicated a paralysis event or any kind of distress. You had a remarkably sound night of sleep, according to the data. We saw no signs of struggle, no spikes in heart rate, no sudden shifts in brain activity. I showed her the printouts, the neat, orderly lines of her sleep stages, the reassuring absence of any anomalies. The objective truth laid bare. "I know," she whispered, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond my office wall, as if seeing something I couldn't. I didn't move. I couldn't, but I was awake, paralyzed. He was here, in the room, the same warm light, the same familiar silhouette. This time the voice was clearer, more insistent, almost frustrated. "She's not listening," he said. "She needs to know the ring is safe. Grandma's ring. I put it away for her. It's in the cigar box." It was so specific, Dr. Finch, so utterly, undeniably specific. A distinct shiver ran down my spine, something I rarely experienced in my line of work, a sensation that defied my usual scientific detachment. My scientific training immediately sought a rational explanation. A residual dream? A memory fragment from a conversation she'd overheard? But the sheer specificity of the details, the mention of a grandma's ring and a cigar box, was unnerving. It felt too precise for a random hallucination. "Grandma's ring? Cigar box? Does that mean anything to you, Maya?" I asked, my voice betraying a hint of the curiosity that was now overriding my clinical detachment. "No," she said, shaking her head slowly, her eyes now meeting mine, filled with a desperate plea for understanding, for validation. "I've never heard Chloe talk about a ring or a cigar box. Not once. It makes no sense. It's just random details." My scientific mind, ever the pragmatist, immediately kicked into overdrive, attempting to reassert control over the unsettling narrative. Coincidence. Her brain, under extreme stress and sleep deprivation, was creating increasingly elaborate and seemingly specific details to make the narrative more credible to herself, to give form to her terror. It was a coping mechanism, a desperate attempt to rationalize the terrifying, inexplicable experiences she was having. The subconscious mind, under extreme duress, can conjure incredibly vivid and detailed scenarios, drawing from a vast, often unacknowledged reservoir of information. It was a fascinating, if disturbing, manifestation of profound psychological distress, I concluded. "Maya," I said, trying to maintain my professional composure, to keep my voice steady and authoritative. "The data is clear. There's nothing wrong with your sleep from a physiological standpoint. This strongly suggests that the root of the problem is psychological. Stress, anxiety, perhaps even unresolved grief on behalf of your friend, or even a form of vicarious trauma. I strongly recommend you speak with a therapist. We can continue to monitor your sleep, but a dedicated psychological approach seems most appropriate here." I handed her a referral card for a trusted colleague, a highly respected cognitive behavioral therapist specializing in anxiety disorders and trauma. She left my office looking profoundly disappointed, her shoulders slumped even further, as if I had failed her, as if I had dismissed her profound and terrifying experience as mere delusion. I felt a sharp pang of guilt, a rare sensation for me, but I stood firm in my assessment. Science doesn't lie, data doesn't fabricate, or so I believed, with the unwavering conviction of a man who had built his entire career on those very principles. It was the last time I saw Maya as a patient. I filed her case, a curious anomaly, a statistical outlier, but ultimately, in my mind, a case of severe anxiety manifesting in unusually vivid sleep-related hallucinations. Another testament to the complex and often unpredictable power of the human mind, I told myself. A rational explanation for an irrational experience. About a month later, perhaps 6 weeks, I received an unexpected envelope in the mail at my office. It was plain, unadorned, with no return address, just my clinic's address neatly typed. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and felt expensive, almost luxurious, beneath my fingertips. Inside, there was a single folded sheet of paper. It was a letter from Maya. Dr. Finch, I'm writing to you to thank you for trying to help me. I know you didn't believe me, and I don't blame you. I wouldn't have believed me either. I probably still wouldn't, if I hadn't lived through it, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. After my last visit to your office, things got significantly worse. It happened every single night without fail. The same message over and over, a relentless, haunting refrain. Tell her the ring is safe in the cigar box. It got to the point where I was absolutely terrified to close my eyes. Sleep became the enemy. I was failing my classes. My art projects were suffering. I could barely function during the day. The exhaustion was crushing, but the fear was worse. I felt like I was being haunted, not by a generic ghost, but by a very specific, insistent message I couldn't deliver, a burden I couldn't shake. Finally, last weekend, I simply couldn't take it anymore. Chloe was particularly upset, talking about her dad's upcoming death anniversary, and she was really, truly down. I just broke. The words tumbled out of me. I told her everything, about the paralysis, the figure, the voice, and the message about the ring in the cigar box. I braced myself for her reaction, for the pity, the disbelief, the concern that I was completely unraveling, that I had finally lost my grip on reality. She looked at me like I was insane, exactly as I had feared. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of confusion, alarm, and a hint of genuine fear. "Maya, what on earth are you talking about?" she said, her voice strained, almost a whisper. "My dad didn't smoke cigars, not a single one in his life, and my grandma was buried with her ring. It was her most prized possession, a family heirloom. It's impossible." I felt the floor disappear beneath me. This was it, the undeniable proof. I had gone mad. I had created a fantasy so detailed, so compelling, that I had convinced myself it was real. I started apologizing profusely, tears streaming down my face, telling her I needed serious help, that I was so sorry for bringing up her dad in such a bizarre and insensitive way. I was ready to admit myself to a psychiatric ward, but Chloe stopped me. There was a strange, almost dazed expression on her face. A memory, a faint, distant echo, was struggling to surface, like a bubble rising from the depths of a forgotten well. Her brow furrowed in intense thought, then her eyes widened, a sudden, sharp gasp escaping her lips. "Wait," she said, her voice barely audible, a tremor running through it. "Cigar box. My grandfather smoked cigars. My dad's dad. He had an old cedar box where he kept little trinkets, things he found interesting. After he died, my dad kept it. He said the smell reminded him of his father. It was just a sentimental thing. I never really paid much attention to it, just an old box." We went to her mom's house the very next day. Chloe hadn't seen the box in years, but her mom, after a moment of thought, knew exactly where it was, tucked away in the back of a dusty closet in the old study, filled with old keys, forgotten coins, and other miscellaneous odds and ends. Chloe pulled it out. The faint, lingering scent of cedar and old tobacco filled the air, a faint, nostalgic aroma that seemed to carry echoes of the past. And inside, beneath a pile of old papers and forgotten mementos, was a small, delicate gold ring. It was simple, elegant, with a tiny, almost imperceptible sapphire stone. Chloe's mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning recognition. "That's my mother's ring," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes, her voice thick with emotion. We thought it was lost decades ago. Your father searched everywhere for it before she died. He wanted her to have it, to wear it one last time. Apparently, Mr. Thompson had found the ring a few months before he passed away, tucked away in an old coat pocket, and had, for some reason, put it into his own father's cigar box for safekeeping, planning to give it to Chloe as a surprise, perhaps on her birthday or a special occasion. But he never got the chance. He died suddenly, unexpectedly, and the ring remained hidden, a secret known only to him, until now. Dr. Finch, since that day, I haven't had a single episode of sleep paralysis, not one. I sleep soundly, deeply, peacefully. My room is dark and quiet. The presence, the light, the voice, it's all gone. I feel a profound sense of peace, a lightness I haven't known in months, perhaps years. I don't know what happened. I don't know what it was. Was it a ghost? A message from beyond? Or something else entirely, something our science can't yet comprehend? But it wasn't a dream. It wasn't just anxiety. It was real. I leave you with this story, not to convince you of anything, but because I felt you, as a man of science, needed to know the ending. The scientific explanation you offered, while logical and comforting in its rationality, simply doesn't account for the facts. There are things beyond our understanding, and sometimes they choose to manifest in the most unexpected and undeniably real ways. Sincerely, Maya. I read the letter 3 times. Each time, the words seemed to burn themselves into my mind, challenging every assumption I had ever held. Then I went to my archives, my usually orderly files, and pulled out Maya's sleep study. I looked at the clean, orderly lines of her brainwaves, at the perfect textbook cadence of her sleep cycles. Data, facts, evidence, unassailable, objective truth, laid out in neat graphs and numbers. But none of it, not a single line, not a single data point, explained how she could have known about an object that was hidden, forgotten, in a place she had never seen, related to a family history she had never heard. How could a hallucination, a mere projection of the subconscious, conjure such precise, verifiable information? It defied every principle of neuroscience, every law of logic, every tenet of scientific inquiry I had ever learned or taught. What had I witnessed? Was it a case of extrasensory perception, a rare, inexplicable ability triggered by an altered sleep state, a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind? Was it a 1 in a trillion coincidence, where a young woman's delirious brain, under immense psychological pressure, somehow stumbled upon an obscure, forgotten truth? Or was it something more profound, more unsettling? A father, desperate to send one last message of love and comfort to his grieving daughter, found the only door ajar he could, the only conduit available, the mind of a stranger sleeping in the next room. A final, desperate act of paternal love, reaching across the veil between life and death, manifesting in a way that defied all rational explanation. I have no definitive answer. The truth, if it exists in a form we can comprehend, remains elusive. I scaled back my full-time clinical practice little more than a year after that. I continued to teach, to consult, to contribute to academic journals, but the unwavering fire of my scientific certainty, the absolute conviction that everything could be explained, had dimmed. How could I sit across from a terrified patient and tell them with absolute confidence that their demons were merely neurological shadows, mere misfirings of the brain, when I myself had looked into the abyss and seen something looking back, something that defied my carefully constructed world of logic and reason, something that whispered of possibilities beyond the measurable, beyond the known? Maya's case remains, to this day, my most unexplained, an enduring anomaly in my meticulously ordered world of logic and reason. And it serves as a humbling, constant reminder that there are mysteries in the human mind, and perhaps, just perhaps beyond it, that our most sophisticated instruments, our most advanced theories, may never be able to fully measure or comprehend. And sometimes, the most important message is not found in the data, not in the scientific explanation, but in the profound, unsettling silence that is left behind, a silence that invites us to question everything we thought we knew.